Okay, what if I told you that the biggest running shift, the biggest breakthrough that you can make in your running journey is not physical, it's mental. It's all in your mind. And whether you're just getting started or you're chasing a big goal, your mindset is the game changer. When I started running on January the 3rd, 2010, I had no idea where it would take me. Back then, I wasn't a runner. I'd just finished cycle touring in 2009 and I needed a new challenge. I started with Parkruns, then a 10K in Manchester, and before I knew it, I was signing up for an ultra marathon. But the truth is, I wasn't just running for fitness. I was running because something inside of me clicked. And here's where my story might mirror yours. Maybe you've had the same nagging thought that you could go further, you could run faster, or that big goal that you're chasing, it is possible. Maybe, like me, you've caught yourself daydreaming about what it might be like to go full time or to commit to a really big, scary goal. So this is a story about how I went from grinding away at a desk job to living in a tiny village in Spain, backing myself to run full time and then fully committing. So if I rewind to January the 3rd, 2010, that was my first run and I was terrible. But the previous year, I'd spent cycle touring in Asia. And literally my job was to wake up in the morning, cycle as far as I possibly could before I got hungry, then have breakfast, then cycle as far as I possibly could before I got knackered, then have dinner, cycle a bit more, and then find a hotel, a hostel, or a temple, wherever I could sleep for the night. So I'd taken a sabbatical, and then I'd spent 11, 12 months just cycling, building that aerobic base, which I'd later be able to tap into as a runner. And I always say this because the difference is so stark from where I started to where I got very, very quickly within 1 to 2 years. But that first run really was as bad as I often say. I went out thinking, I'll just go out for an hour run, because I'd been cycling for 8, 10, 12 hours a day, consecutive days. And so that seemed really easy for me, but I just didn't have the running fitness. I mispaced it and I had to walk back after about 400 meters to my house. But then I was like you. I was on the internet, I was trying to figure out, okay, how do I get good at running? What does that look like? What does that base building look like? What does the structure of the week look like? What do I need to do? And I made all the mistakes you can possibly make, but I'm in that phase where whatever I do moves me forward. And like you, I just wanted to be good at it. And so I needed to figure out what was good. And so I messaged somebody at my old running club and said, what's a good time for 10K? And he said 34 minutes is a good club runner time. And so I used to go to this treadmill in Hua Hin in Thailand because it was so hot outdoors. And I tried to run as fast as I possibly could on that treadmill, gradually build the speed, but go way too fast and try to hold as long as I possibly could, that pace. And it was a ridiculous strategy and the perfect strategy to get injured, but I was like a dog with a bone. And the only reason I left that cycle touring life and went back to Europe, went back to the UK, was because my mate was getting married and we needed to go to Mallorca to go to his stag party or bachelor party. And so I went back there and it was a great weekend, but what I took away from the weekend was I definitely don't want to be living that life again. I hadn't been drinking for the entire time that I'd been cycle touring. It just didn't make sense for me to do that whilst I was cycling and to be in Thailand where you can easily get in trouble if you're overly drunk or whatever. But what I got from that weekend was I definitely don't want to go back to that life. And what I also got as soon as I got back to Manchester was the option or the opportunity to go and do parkruns. And when you're stood on the start line, even for a parkrun, you feel, or I felt, all those competitive vibes, all that nervousness, those butterflies in your stomach that I want to do well, I want to win this. And my first parkrun, after going absolutely mental on the treadmill, both in Thailand and then back at Fitness First in Manchester, just really going for it, not doing too much outdoors, so that crossover was different, completely mispaced the 5K, but ran under 19 minutes. And the big take home from that race was, okay, this is the line in the stand. This is where you're starting, and now you need to get better. And that racing is so important for you to do, whether you do that all out and you go for a PB, or whether you just control that race, be disciplined, use it as a training race, it's so important because you can go much faster in a race than you can in training. So I went from running my first park run in 18 minutes 20 to running my second park run 3 weeks later in 16 minutes and 30 seconds. And to me, the only thing that said was, I remember 34 minutes was a good time for 10K, and 16:30 would suggest that I can run a 10K in 34 minutes. By this point, I knew 1,000,000% that this is what I wanted to do, and I needed to figure out a way to make this my full-time job. Fast forward just a couple of months, and I'm living in Sweden, I'm training in Sweden for a race in the south of Spain, an ultra race 50 kilometers uphill. And it was when I got to the end of that ultra race and just saw the guys on the podium, and I thought, I knew this is what I wanted to do full time. But now I know the domain in which I can actually make this work. I can be a good ultra runner. And so, like most of us, there wasn't anything insanely talented about my running. I don't have a huge VO2 max. There's nothing spectacular about my physiology. Where I'm probably off the charts is my stubborn nature of wanting to make things work. And this is where it comes on to mindset. When I was on top of that mountain at the finish line, and I remember it so clearly, I knew that if I could become good at this race, I would become good at all my running, because it wouldn't get much tougher than this. And I knew that the best way to become good at that race was to move to the course. And so my whole existence became, how can I move from Sweden to get closer to the course? And how can I train on that course and become the best possible runner I could? And by this point, I'd ran 16:30 for 5K, which would get me maybe in the top 500 in Britain. Certainly not today, but back then, yeah. I just ran under 40 minutes, 39:50 for 10K. And I'd ran a marathon in 3 hours and 25. But I'd already made up my mind that I was going to attack becoming a professional runner. And I couldn't fall back like you can now on, okay, I'm gonna document the journey, I'm gonna become a running influencer, and that part of my journey is gonna be way more interesting than me winning. I needed to either win and become somebody that can win races, or I wouldn't get paid. But the idea of not trying and then regretting it later was so frightening versus actually going for it and failing. And I think that's the key point. And so it's the end of January, and I go from -20, -30, up to -35 in Sweden, and I'm absolutely fed up of shoveling snow, to this tiny little village next to Granada called Alameda Granada, 6,000 population, but it's the middle of winter, and the houses are not built for winter like they are in Sweden. So it feels like my main job is to keep one room in a big house warm by keep putting wood on the fire, and to the point where I need to set my alarm in the middle of the night so that the room doesn't go cold. And I'm training both before in Sweden and in Alameda Granada like I'm a professional athlete, so that is not ideal, but I'm still moving forward, and I'm attacking this like everything else in my life is just an afterthought, and this is priority number one. But I managed to get a place in Seville Marathon, and it cost me about 19 euros, and it was the most disorganized event back then. It's now become a really well-oiled machine. But we drove across there, me and a friend, Mick, 250 kilometers, stayed the night before, and my job was just to run under 3 hours, because I felt as if I'd failed at the marathon once, and I wanted to tick this sub-3 box. And then it was late at night, and I was thinking to myself, why is that important to me? And I came to the conclusion that it wasn't important to me, it was probably important that I show other people that I'm capable of running a sub-3 hour marathon. And so I'm calculating on my phone, what pace do I think I can hold throughout the entire 42 kilometers? And I came up with sub 240. And that next morning, February 2012, I ended up running 2 hours and 37. So I went out in the first half and ran 1:19 and did a minute negative split. And I remember crossing the finish line and having maybe 2 or 3 minutes of joy, thinking, brilliant, I've ran way faster than I did last year, 48 minutes faster. It's a huge PB, to a feeling of, I could have gone way faster in the first half. And so all of a sudden, like taking a step back, and obviously hindsight's a wonderful thing, all of a sudden I realized that the only real thing that had changed from Sweden to Spain was me going all in and fully committing on something that I genuinely cared about and was incredibly passionate about. The training had been pretty similar. I was doing a few more intervals. My long runs had gone longer because all of a sudden I was living in the middle of the mountains, and my long runs would be long undulating runs for 3-4 hours. So I had that strength and endurance, and I was topping that up with a bit of speed. But had my training changed much? Not really. And then just a month later, I end up going to Malaga half marathon, because at this point I'm in the headspace of, if there's a race, I'm doing it. So I'm not thinking about recovery time, optimal recovery time after a marathon, and then going again for another build-up. I'm just thinking, I want my hat in the ring for absolutely everything. So I cycled from Alhama de Granada all the way down to Malaga via the motorway, which was really funny, and then raced the very next morning. And then I ran 72 minutes because that made sense as well. I could do 2:37, and so I should really be at somewhere around 75 minutes, but I'm just gonna go off, see how I feel, and then, latch onto a group and go from there. And then after the race, within an hour, I'm cycling all the way back home, another 160K to get home. So that shouldn't work. It shouldn't work to be putting that much pressure on your body. Body should be breaking, in which it started to break that year. So I'm starting having little problems. Then I'm starting having bigger injuries because I'm just doing too much too soon. And so if I look at my first couple of years in running, I go from January the 3rd, 2010, not being able to run for 400 meters, to just over 2 years later, February, March 2012, running 72 minutes for the half marathon and 2:37 for the marathon. It's not the times that I'm most proud of. It's fully committing and having the faith or belief in myself to go all in, to relocate my entire life, because that's what made sense to me. It made sense for me to be closer to the course and to be able to train in the conditions that top runners train in order to get the absolute most out of my body and set myself up for success. And I know that is an incredibly fortunate and privileged way to think, because maybe if I was from a different country, maybe if I was from where I am now in Thailand, I wouldn't be able to take that leap of faith. It just wouldn't be available to me. Maybe I wouldn't even have a passport. And I've often thought that over the years, that if I was born in Russia, where my girlfriend's from, maybe I wouldn't have had that opportunity either. And it's funny because I'm not even sure it's to do with the passport that you hold or your location, where you're from, etc. I don't even think it's genetic, because recently I've got 2 sisters and both of them are crazy about sport, but they're also crazy about animals. And so I needed somebody I could trust to come and mind my house at some point this year. And so I offered my younger sister, can you be here for 30 days, an entire month, mind my car, mind my house, and by the way, you get a holiday in Thailand. And she was super excited about that. That was a dream for her. And so she needed to go and ask her boss, and the boss came back and said no. And I couldn't help but be a little bit heartbroken by that, knowing that we're both from the same mother, we're both from the same place, very close together in age, 18 months. And yet I think I can, and she has to go and ask somebody for permission in order to go and live this, dream vacation or dream holiday. And so you'd think that the mindset would be pretty similar. She's smarter than me, she's wittier than me, she's much quicker than me, but she has to go and ask somebody for that permission, and that has never sat well with me. And I've never thought that, okay, I'm so much better than everybody else. I've been in the corner where if somebody else can do it, then I'm pretty sure that I could have a go at it. Whereas you've got people, maybe Michael Jordan's a perfect example, or Tiger Woods, they don't even need the proof that somebody else has achieved it. They just think they can do it anyway, whether it's been done before or not. And so what's the point in this? Do I even have a conclusion? I speak to runners all the time. Many of them are way more talented than me. and they're aiming for big things, but they also have other factors in their life, full-time job, family, that restrict the amount of time that they can train or the amount that they can put into training. And I'll often get comments below which will be something similar to, I ran 1 hour 45 for the half marathon after a year training. Can I run one day my dream time of 90 minutes? And so I'm gonna give you something really obvious here. But if you think you can or you think you can't, you're probably right. If you're at 1 hour 45 for the marathon at the moment and you are absolutely 110% committed to running 90 minutes or faster, you're definitely going to do it. There is no doubt in my mind that not only can you do it, but you can surpass that. And once you surpass it, all of a sudden many doors open mentally that you're capable of way more. And likewise, if you think that you can't, or if there are any doubts there, or you're worried if you can get committed enough to execute a training plan, you're probably not going to do it. And so for me, it's all a case of how much do you want it. And if you're really, really passionate about running and you want to run much faster times, it's all there for the taking. It's just you against you. As I always say, nobody else cares. And so if you really want it and you're willing to take bold steps, whether it's with your current training, how that looks, your commitment to getting up early in the morning, your commitment to your diet, your commitment to strength training and everything else that goes on, you're going to move forward massively. And so when you're talking to me about, I want to move forward 2%, or I want to move forward 5%, or even 10%, it's child's play compared to what you're actually capable of.